Do we get it right? That's coming up. Most of Selangor and 14 localities in Kuala Lumpur will be under the enhanced movement control order for 2 weeks starting from Saturday. Senior Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said such a move is needed given the rise in COVID-19 cases, especially in the Klang Valley. The Enhanced Movement Control Order, or EMCO, will among others restrict those in areas affected to stay at home, with only one from each household allowed out to buy essential goods. A curfew after 8 p.m. will also be imposed. Ismail Sabri said workers who are not involved in essential services are not allowed to leave EMCO areas and cannot go to work throughout the EMCO period. Only food, daily necessity product factories are allowed to operate. Meanwhile, interstate movement for vaccination outside EMCO area is allowed. E-hailing vehicles are only allowed to carry one passenger with the single driver. For the third consecutive day, Malaysia recorded more than 6,000 daily COVID cases, with 6,988 new infections reported today. Now, this has raised questions if the nationwide lockdown that has been in place for a month is effective. We speak to public health and health economic expert Professor Syed Muhammad Al-Junid to discuss what needs to be done to bring down infections.
The number of cases has came down a little bit, but then it goes up again, and now I think the situation is back to before the MCOs. So this current approach that we use in trying to control the pandemic by focusing too much on MCOs shows that it has a very limited effect on controlling the number of cases. So we need to change the strategy. And why is it we fail actually in doing it more effectively? There are many factors. One of it is that the action that we are around MCOs has not been carried out properly. There are still a lot of people who actually break the laws and also do not follow the standard operating procedures. And we do not have the action that should be taken by people at the ground level who are supposed to actually carry this out in a proper manner to make sure that the cases are not being spread out within the community.
Syed Al-Junid said the government should not solely focus on daily infection numbers to tackle the pandemic, but to employ different set of indicators for every state.
In basic epidemiology, the numbers mean nothing. What we need to look at is actually the rates of the infection within the community. So the smaller states will probably have a less number of cases. It does not mean that they are less effective, less infective, and also the incidence of the diseases is actually less over there because the population base, which is the denominator in the calculation, is much smaller. But in order to do this effectively, where you want to actually focus on various states and using slightly different indicators tailor-made toward each state, you need two things. Number one, you need the system to be decentralized, and this is lacking in our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is too centralized, so much so that our leaders cannot think how actually we can actually decentralize this and localize mobilize the local effort in order to manage the pandemic. So decentralization of activities is very important, and also decentralization of power for the people at the ground level, at the local level, to take their own initiative to solve the problem by taking into consideration the context that are surrounding them in each of the state and each of the localities.
Dr. Syed Al-Junid said while a decentralized approach could help turn the tide against the pandemic, states need better funding to be able to do so effectively.
You need to have a proper funding. And this funding, these resources must flow to the local areas, must flow to each state. So states that have a lot of funding, for example, Selangor, Penang, and also other rich states like Wilayah Persekutuan, they may not have a problem. But what about those in the less fortunate states, for example, in the rural states such as Kedah, Kelantan, Terengganu? They probably might have less resources to deal with. So the funding must come in, so that if there is any action that are going to be taken and planned by the state at the local level, it has to be supported by enough funding. And this is very important aspect that we need to consider.
The dosing interval for AstraZeneca vaccine will be shortened from 12 to 9 weeks. Coordinating Minister for the National COVID-19 Immunization Program, Khairi Jamaluddin, ensured that those who received the first round of the vaccine will be notified of their second appointment soon. Khairi said the decision was made based on recommendations from the technical working group and after greater clarity of the delivery schedule. He said this after welcoming the arrival of 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines donated by the Japanese government. The first opt-in program for the AstraZeneca vaccine in May for Kuala Lumpur and Selangor residents was fully booked within hours after registration opened. Workers in the plantation and commodities sector are next in line to receive COVID vaccination. It will be the fourth sector involved in the industrial vaccination program after construction, transportation and manufacturing sectors that were approved earlier. Minister in charge of vaccine, Khairi Jamaluddin, said the National COVID-19 Immunization Task Force is also looking into proposals from other sectors such as retail and tourism to be included in the industrial vaccination program. This, he said, is based on priority to operate according to the phases of the National Recovery Plan. Meanwhile, Khairi also announced that the task force has so far approved 27 industrial vaccination centres for the construction, transportation and manufacturing sectors that will involve some 373,000 workers across 3 sectors. A total of 468 suicide cases were reported throughout Malaysia in the first 5 months of this year. According to the police, Selangor has the highest recorded numbers so far at 117 cases. In total, 1,708 suicide cases were recorded in Malaysia from 2019 to May 2021, making it 2 cases every day on average. Out of which, 1,099 cases were from January 2020, shortly after COVID-19 hit the country, until May this year. According to Bukit Aman Criminal Investigation Department, most of the victims were women and below 40 years old. The police urge individuals facing problems to seek help and support from family, friends and from counselling. We'll take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back and on to international news. Indonesia's most populated islands will be under emergency lockdown measures this week. President Joko Widodo announced new curbs in the economic centers of Java and Bali to arrest a steep rise in COVID-19 cases. The country is grappling with the worst outbreak in Southeast Asia, reporting a series of record daily cases since mid-June. The emergency curbs, which come into effect from July 3rd to 20th, will shut shopping malls, force non-essential workers to work from home and ban dining in at restaurants. The curbs come after Indonesia reported record daily numbers of COVID cases of more than 20,000 as the spread of the more contagious Delta variant accelerated infections and strained the country's healthcare sector. Indonesian business groups, meanwhile, urge authorities to ensure there is enough financial support for companies, warning that otherwise new restrictions could result in layoffs and bankruptcies. Thailand welcomed its first tourists back to the island of Phuket as the country tries to reboot its tourism industry. About 250 fully vaccinated people, mainly from the Middle East, are expected to arrive on 4 flights as part of the Phuket Sandbox scheme. None of the arrivals need to quarantine, but they cannot travel to the mainland within 14 days. It is hoped the scheme will bring in some $270 million in the next 3 months. However, that is still far short of Thailand's pre-pandemic revenue from tourism, which accounts for about a fifth of the country's economy. It is estimated that Thailand lost about $50 billion following the impact on tourism due to COVID-19. If Phuket Sandbox is successful, the country will roll out the scheme to other islands. Moscow will begin offering booster vaccine shots against COVID-19 as the government scrambles to fight a surge in cases blamed on the highly infectious Delta variant. This makes Russia one of the first countries globally to begin revaccination. The Health Ministry issued new regulations yesterday recommending clinics to administer booster doses to people vaccinated 6 months ago or more. Despite starting its vaccination program in January, Russia has inoculated just 16% of its 144 million population due to a low demand for shots and widespread distrust. The Health Ministry said it would recommend booster doses for vaccinated people every 6 months until at least 60% of the adult population is vaccinated. Chinese President Xi Jinping warned that the country will not be bullied by foreign forces. He delivered the defiant speech to a crowd of 70,000 at Tiananmen Square today to mark the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. In his keynote address, Xi pledged that China would not accept sanctimonious preaching in remarks widely seen as directed at the US. It comes as China faces criticism over alleged human rights abuses and its crackdown in Hong Kong. Relations between the US and China have worsened in recent times over trade, espionage and the pandemic. In his speech, Xi also pledged to grow China's military to world-class standards and reiterated a commitment to restore stability to Hong Kong through the national security law and to restore Taiwan to the nation of China. Our understanding of how to diagnose and manage long COVID may still be evolving, but policy response for post-COVID recovery and rehabilitation needs to be in place. Tonight on Consider This, we speak to experts about new frontiers in the pandemic that's coming up. And that is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. We'll see you tomorrow.